Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the summer edition of the Content Delivery Summit 2021. Today, we're going on a journey together through the telecoms, hardware, and software infrastructures that work in concert to meet the seemingly insatiable demand for digital content. Be prepared to take in a whole feast of stimulating topics exploring every part of the modern content delivery chain. Since you'll hear quite a lot from me today, let me briefly introduce myself. My name's Don Robinson and I'm the chair and programmer of today's event. Many of you will know me for writing for Streaming Media Magazine for 20 years this month, but my day job is looking after business development and innovation at software company Ideas, where we build software for CDNs and publishers who are seeking to deliver high-grade, carrier-grade, high availability live streaming in massively distributed and complex environments. As one of the sponsors today, you'll hear more about ideas from my colleague Adrian Rowe during the 3:30 session on CDN orchestration. For my own part, I've been playing with image transfer over IP networks since 1990 when I cut my teeth on VAX mini computers, making time lapses of fast orbiting binary stars on a 1 kilopixel resolution CCD that cost $500,000. I guess that counts as a very low frame rate video stream. In late 1996, I did my first webcast and one of the first in the UK from the Ministry of Sound, followed by many hundreds of live webcasts for the likes of Fatboy Slim, Downing Street, Parliament and Glastonbury, and a lot of much less exciting financial, sporting and corporate events, all of them notably using US CDNs, which prompted me to form my own UK-based CDN in 2001, a pioneering CDN focused on driving multicast adoption into access networks across Europe. This was followed by co-founding Ideas in 2010, since when I've also written a couple of books, quick plug, on CDNs, and before Content Delivery Summit, I was chairing the Content Delivery World and Content Delivery Forum in London for much of the past decade. I co-host Streaming Media Advanced Forum monthly podcast and founded the Greening of Streaming, but more on that in a moment. In spring last year, Eric and Streaming Media invited me to program and chair Content Delivery Summit, and despite challenges around the ever-changing COVID scenario, the past two events have been received very well, with the new format getting excellent feedback and the audience increasing by an order of magnitude. So thank you to Eric and a big welcome back to those of you who've joined us before, and a huge welcome to those of you who are new. I just want to highlight a tweak to this year's programming. We've been inundated and humbled by the number of sponsors who've supported CDS this time round. While we previously had breaks through the day, which we filled with sponsor videos and sponsor-led content, due to time pressures and the number of sponsors, we're inviting sponsors to speak to a single slide for just a minute as they come up in the panels and programs. So to that end, I would like to say hello to one of my co-hosts for today, Mark de Jong, whose company Axello is one of our sponsors. Mark, over to you.
Hey, Dom. Yes, just a little word from me from Axello. So Axello basically does two things. One is we help media companies with business consulting and technical consulting in areas of CDN, streaming media, infrastructures, and OTT. That's one side of the business. And on the other side, we really help companies in Europe go to market with video technology companies with go-to-market strategies and business acceleration, as we call it. And because we're on both sides of the fence, we help vendors on one side, we go to market, and we help media companies on the other side, on the consultancy side. We're able to bring additional capabilities on the table by matching both sides of the fence. And that's basically how we bring our business to both sides and help companies on both ends.
Perfect. So, Mark, you alluded to a secret CDN-related mission on LinkedIn recently. Any more insight?
Yes. So some people, I think, I'm pretty sure saw this. I did an announcement on April 1st, and it was not April Fool's, on a new CDN initiative, as I called it, CDN-related player. A lot of guessing from a lot of people. I'm giving a little bit more ideas around it right now, which is really about. So what we really want to do is bring the CDN community and the CDN industry together in one single place, and really help them to connect, to professionalize the industry, to professionalize the community, and eventually also be a spokes organization for the industry. So we're not revealing the name yet as such, but we've been talking to around 50, 60 companies in the meantime. And we're also launching a questionnaire soon, with just to understand what the actual business challenges, technical challenges are for the industry. And with that, we really want to move forward and make real change within the industry for the better. That's basically what we're planning on doing.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to be keeping up with you on LinkedIn, if not nowhere else on that one. That's cool. And what are you going across today on your panels, Mark?
So I got a couple of sessions, Core IP, Operator CDN, and another one. Great sessions, good prepared. We have questions prepared, so we're really set to go. Really interesting conversations in the meantime already.
Okay, perfect. And that brings me nicely onto my second host and fellow contributing editor at Streaming Media, Tim Siglin. Tim's the founding executive director of the Help Me Stream Research Foundation and also co-hosts smadvanceforum.com with me on the first Thursday of each month. Tim, are you out there?
I am, Dom. How are you doing today?
Bad, rushing because I've still got to do the agenda bit and I'm already behind, and I've been dogging you all week about not getting behind. But what have you got on your sessions coming up today? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I could say it in 2 words and then you'd be back on track. But let me actually just say we have a really good compute panel a bit later today, looking at high density storage compute, and then one on QoS switching QoS management and CDN switching. And then, of course, I get to be part of 2 fireside chats, one with you, with Akamai, and then one with Eric with Disney. So really looking forward to it.
Right, and I'm going to rattle through the next couple of minutes and try to not cut into our keynote timing too much. So Steve from Streaming Media is also in the wings, helping with speaker and panelist management. And I don't want to forget to thank Monica, Sheila, Tom, Stacey, and Joel for all they do to make CDS happen too. Hit the chat room in Zoom if you have any questions to the panels or technical issues that the backstage crew could help you with. So today the pace will be fast and furious. Most of the sessions are 30 minutes long and are back to back. So I ask everyone speaking to be concise and succinct, me included, and to be on time. Please accept my advance apologies if Tim, Mark, or I start cutting across overrunning sessions to keep us on time. If we have a major time pressure, I will ring the bell, and I need to ring it for myself right now. Or, being one of the real benefits of working on Zoom, we will mute you in the virtual equivalent of pushing you off the stage. So there is much to explore in the content delivery sector. There are many who think of a CDN as a layer of caching for proxy serving on-demand files more cheaply than delivering directly from a remote single origin. Price-driven CDN strategies such as this was center stage when long-haul fiber was a scarce commodity. Times have changed over the last 2 decades. There are others who think that the CDN is all about network optimization for transferring digital information more reliably and with less latency than competing options. That performance focus has dominated the sector over the past decade. CDNs were also some of the pioneers of highly distributed cloud and edge computing. As we'll hear in the future briefings later today, this is an increasingly central part of the CDN proposition. The emphasis each CDN places on these approaches makes each unique, but one thing is common. The role the CDN plays is usually as a value-added reseller of many aggregated complex underlying technologies, simplifying the procurement for those in the upper layers who just want their content delivered. In modern terminology, this might be called a true platform as a service model. And this means CDNs have to be versed in carrier telecoms, data centers, power, infrastructure, silicon, access technologies, and more. And all that before a single byte of application code is compiled and executed for a content delivery task, be that low latency HLS, DRM, digital ad insertion, WebRTC security, IoT support, serverless compute, or any number of other origin and edge functions. Let me just bring the agenda slide up for a second. So those of you who've been to CDS before will recognize my agenda. It is unapologetically almost the same as the past 2 CDS, and I dare say it will remain the same as long as I'm programming things. While many events in our space chase fashionable buzzwords up the agendas, we are not here today to make analysts tweet or speculating VCs reach for their crypto wallets. We're focusing on architects, strategists, thought leaders, and implementers who are dealing day-to-day with the real-world challenges of content delivery at scale. The narrative to encompass the whole supply chain today is about underpinning CDNs and the ever-evolving propositions that CDNs bring to market. This does mean we cover a lot of ground, from submarine fiber through to the future of distributed computing. Each section of the day builds on the previous. Indeed, sharp engineering eyes will notice that I'm following the classic network stack model as the day progresses. Inevitably, we can only explore a tiny fraction of each horizontal in the stack. However, by presenting these logically, we aim to give systems planners and architects a full scope of the interlocking elements that comprise a modern CDN. Naturally, there will be topics we can't go as deep on as we'd like to, and I encourage you to contact me or the other moderators to help you connect with speakers who have touched on topics that you would like to explore more deeply. This also means that CDS is very much a summit now. The event is a meeting of peers exploring their common challenges and variety of approaches that they take to tackle them. You will see representatives from many technology vendors, but I must remind you that in this sector, each vendor is a customer of lower layers and a supplier to upper layers. And while on the face of it, CDS should be a bunch of sales guys selling, actually the caliber of speakers and attitude they bring always amazes me. And the cooperative approach through the day will always leave everyone from delegates to speakers more informed and better able to make decisions. In fact, the only thing that will be missing is a few beers and some crazy napkin whiteboarding at the end of the day. But those opportunities are now, if a little tentatively, at least on the horizon again. A couple of last things. As always, as a chairman's perk, I will be weaving in a regular revisit to sustainability and power as a central theme. And I'm proud that having driven the issue into the agenda last year with my Greening of Streaming initiative, sustainability is now becoming a common reporting topic for financial quarterlies across the public companies in this sector. And that leads me on to my final note. One change to the program is that we previously had coffee breaks, lunch breaks, and tea breaks in our virtual program. But since we're all on different time zones, and because these breaks are just dead air on a Zoom webcast, this time we're filling those sessions with some slightly more relaxed fireside chats. We have Akamai talking with me and Tim on their sustainability activities in the morning. Then we have Dave Temkin, formerly the helm of Netflix CDN, speaking with me over what East Coasters might call lunchtime. And then in the afternoon, we have tech leaders from Disney Plus and Hulu to talk about their technical strategy. These firesides are not planned to be as deep as the main panels and presentations, but rather than give you dead air, we thought it would be good to recruit some of the most interesting people in our sector to share some experience and insights. So, with a full 8 hours ahead of us, let's get stuck in. Let me hand you to Tim and Eric for our opening session with StackPath. Tim, Eric, are you out there?
I'm out here. You out here, Tim?
Yeah, I'm out here, Eric. I'll let you go ahead and step up.
You bet. As Dom said, we have a jam-packed program today, and so there is little time for pleasantries. And so I am just going to jump right into the opening session of the day, which is a report on a survey that Streaming Media, Help Me Stream Research Foundation, and Unisphere Research did with our partner StackPath to look into the 2021 content delivery and edge compute trends. Are my slides showing correctly, folks? Okay, thanks so much. As I said, we don't have much time for pleasantries, so let's dive right in. Joining us speaking today will be Arash Marzban, the SVP of Product for StackPath. Arash, are you out there?
I am. Good morning. Thanks for having me with you guys this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. I keep saying it, but let's keep things going here. Tim, can you sort of start us off? And I don't think we need to talk about too much about the demographics of the survey or anything like that. You'll be writing an article for streamingmedia.com soon that will go into some of that and report on some of these findings. But what's your 50,000-foot view?
So my 50,000-foot view, it's been a number of years since we did one of these, and stepping back and looking at it, when we did the last one several years ago, there was fragmentation in the market. Today, there's even more fragmentation. And that may sound like a frustrating step backwards, but as we go through the details here, we'll actually see that it sort of makes sense. And then edge computing is early days. That's the other thing that I'm going to say here is that early days for edge compute, we're all talking about it. I know Dom says we like to avoid buzzwords, but this is certainly one of those words that has attracted a lot of interest in the industry, and we'll sort of talk about the stages on that. Arash, real quick, before we jump into all of these, just since you're the sponsor, tell us a little bit about StackPath, 30 seconds to 60 seconds.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to. So StackPath is an edge computing platform. Really what we provide to the market is a mix of full-fledged compute at the edge, really operating out of similar locations that CDNs do, but then also a suite of what I would call edge applications, one of which is one of the cornerstones and one of the drivers for even this discussion today, which is CDN and delivery in general. We also provide security services. And ultimately, we're a growing company that's focused on trying to really empower and build an edge that is suited for developers, content streamers, and really advanced use cases across gaming and media, especially as we see kind of applications and services merge into what I'll call the next generation of multimedia. So whether it be video with chat or video with engagement or call it multicam video, all of these are really interesting kind of use cases that combining really powerful full-fledged edge computing with CDN ultimately delivers. So that's what we're focused on at StackPath. Awesome, very good. So Eric, if you'll jump onto the first sort of slide, I mentioned fragmentation. This slide sort of gives you a good example of fragmentation. You know, we typically hear about the big few CDNs. You can see here across the board as we asked respondents to choose who they used, we allowed them to choose multiples. And so that's another big thing here is that while someone may use one as a primary, there's also, we're very much in a multi-CDN world. Two comments on this. One is we put in other, just because I like to do that to make sure we're not missing anybody. We had 33 different other CDNs listed that weren't on our initial list that people said, hey, these are ones we use. Also had people saying, look, AWS isn't a CDN, et cetera. Totally understand the different definitions around CDNs, but ultimately what we're finding is that to what Arash was saying, you know, people are using different platforms for different needs, some for storage, some for video delivery, et cetera. Arash, does this sort of surprise you in terms of the fragmentation on this slide?
Yeah, the bad news is not at all. It doesn't surprise me. And you know, it's really interesting because I think there's two really key themes that we've seen in the industry for a little while. One of which is, you know, at the high end of the market, it is all around multi-CDN. It's around leveraging multiple CDNs, enabling a broad base of delivery, having some additional resiliency, even though, you know, I would, you know, always kudos to all of the CDN providers in the market. I think everyone does a great job focusing on a highly redundant, resilient, strong network. But the providers, there's just such great demand for content that they don't want even a millisecond of missed eyeball time in that process, and I can't blame them for it. So the multi-CDN part ties perfectly into this. The fragmentation then I think speaks heavily to another really interesting aspect, which is delivery means a lot of different things to different people. And when you look at it, you know, some are using these CDNs for website acceleration, and that's a very basic or a standard use case for it. And you're likely to see those types of users, at least from what we've experienced, you know, where the hosting kind of, and I'm using hosting in air quotes, is attached and sitting. And it certainly makes a lot of sense as to why we see this distribution. It is use case specific as to where you're going to sit, which CDNs you're going to use, why you're going to select the CDN, and all of those play into it. And there's plenty of room in the market. Of course, it is becoming more and more competitive, no matter how you look at it, especially as demand continues to grow for content in everyone's homes.
Sure, and actually that's a really nice segue into the next slide, which when you talked about different use cases, now knowing that we have primarily a streaming focus when we send out surveys from streamingmedia.com, this one actually was really nice to see that streaming was second. Obviously that makes sense that it's high on the list, but performance far and away was the first, and then security was third. And more and more these days with content delivery, there aren't just conversations around DRM, there are conversations around security of the app, whether it's app shielding, obfuscation, there's security around, you know, the transport piece itself. Just what's the StackPath take on this one, Arash?
Yeah, this is a great one as well. So performance is hands down the most critical, especially when it is for content and media. And obviously, as you go down, streaming, of course, being a big part of that. And the security component you bring up, and we attack that exactly the same way that sort of the respondents view it, which is our perspective is you've got to have application security. You've also got to have a resilient network and platform that can absorb things like a DDoS attack. You're going to get bot attacks. These are just critical, basic things that happen in market when you're in this field or this sector. And so it's got to be built into the platform. It's got to be interoperable with the CDN. And even more important, our view is it has to coexist side by side in the same location as the CDN so that you get the lowest latency. You don't want to add security and destroy your delivery. You want to add security seamlessly and deliver securely. So it's a really, really important component. I think some of the other data points in here, like the geographic regions and image optimization are all around convenience and access to people. And image optimization is around, can I simplify and automate my workflows? And that's, again, something that a lot of companies would rather be able to pump the content in there and not worry about it, configure it, and it just does its job. And making the CDN work for you is a really critical component of that.
And we had an audience comment, does no one care about price? Yes, everyone cares about price, but ultimately at the end of the day, performance trumps price. If you've got your business model in place and you know that you can deliver, the price point becomes a sunk cost as opposed to the primary decision maker. Let's quickly hop on to the next slide here, Eric. And so on this one, someone asked a question earlier about small file downloads. To me, that's table stakes. This, again, we do have a streaming audience, so VOD and live streaming, not a surprise here. Nice to see that live streaming continues to be dominant from a CDN delivery standpoint. Edge computing early days, as I said, 7% here. Let's go ahead and just hop on to the next slide, and then Arash, we can talk a little bit about those. So we asked a secondary question around edge computing, and we said, okay, what are your plans? Right now, about half of the respondents said we don't really have plans for edge compute. The other half said we're either doing pilot projects, we're planning, or we're in full integration. Arash, is this surprising to you, or does this sort of fit the trend of early days of edge compute?
Yeah, I think it fits the trends of early day edge compute really well. And a part of this that I personally find really interesting, because we talk about this inside StackPath, like pretty much as a daily conversation for us as we think about the market and our users and where things are heading. And when I look at it, that stage 3, that full integration, one of the questions we ask is, what is edge computing? And it's such an interesting kind of realm. There's so many different viewpoints on what constitutes edge computing. In one lens, it can be extensibility for the CDN, right? So if you're doing content delivery, you want the ability to further manipulate streams, customize them, do lots of things with, kind of call it situations where you're modifying data, images, content, whatever it might be. Serverless is such a great and absolutely the right approach for scripting that extensibility coming out of a CDN. And the market recognizes that as a form of edge computing. And when I look further left from that stage 3, right, those pilot projects, those that are kind of, they have plans, I think it's a really interesting combination of 2 parts. One of which is, the latency story of edge computing is key. And as we think about what we could possibly build on or how we can enable kind of users and developers to do with edge computing, those are the areas that I know we're really heavily focused on, which is full stack computing. How do I build a VPC that spans edge to core cloud? How do I think about splitting my application up? What part should I be moving to the edge where it gives me better performance and better effectivity versus what do I keep in core cloud? And these are such kind of interesting components, and all of these are still being discussed. I mean, we're talking about it inside StackPath. Our customers and hopefully our future customers are having the same conversations, which is why we see so many in the kind of pilot project and stage 1 plans only segment, and lots of folks who haven't even yet considered what to do with it. But there is a really interesting solution there with, where should I be making my decisions on advertising, right? So dynamic ad insertion, where should that engine live versus my content? And where do I host my ads? And how do I make sure all that server-side ad injection is efficient, closely tied to delivery? These are all really interesting use cases, especially when it comes to video and video delivery. So not surprised.
Yeah, and I agree, education is sort of the key in this particular instance, because as you described multiple use cases there, those are things that people may not think of necessarily as edge compute, but then showing the value of why those can be actually pushed to the edge rather than at the core. Eric, I know we've got relatively limited time, so we're going to just bounce through a couple of these next slides here. And if you've got anything you want to add, Eric, I don't want to dominate in the conversation.
No, I want to hear from you and Arash.
All right, sounds good. So then we asked about the idea around open CDN standards. And what you have here is two pie charts. The pie chart to the left is those who have overall of all of our respondents, whether they were receptive to it. Obviously, we can see 31% saying yes, they are. And then those who are in the pilot project or implementation stage being receptive to CDN, open CDN, that rises to about 38%. I think that's important to understand, that as people go through the process of implementing edge compute, they then begin to think about things like eCDN, open CDN, et cetera. And in fact, the next slide sort of proves out this point. One thing I will add is, yes, the slides will be available. Someone in the audience had asked that. We have a lot of data here, and we understand we may not be able to cover all of it. So again, here, if we said, hey, are you open to the open CDN standards and building your own? Those who said, that 31% that said yes, we asked why you might not develop. And you can see here, lack of expertise, lack of knowledge, lack of financing, et cetera. What's interesting is you move to the people who are in pilot projects, it shifts a bit, where lack of expertise is still top, but business hurdles is the second, and financing is the third, rather than lack of knowledge. Arash, do you want to add any comments to this? Because to me, this is interesting. As people get into sort of piloting edge compute, the model seems to shift a bit.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. Everything is easy until you try it, right? And you know, there's a reason that we've got so many folks, even on the call today with us, that are CDN experts, as well as those that are listening in. And it's because this is a complicated solution, both in the interoperability of the network connectivity and the resiliency of the platform, deployment, maintenance, configuration, integration of security. Like, all of these things have to be answered. And you get into the business hurdle part, and people will start, no matter what happens, they're going to start asking questions. And so it becomes really difficult. And it kind of mirrors that, you know, 30 to 38%, give or take, from the previous slide that shows, hey, people are open to it. It's always really good to investigate your options, and everyone should do that. That is just good business. It's good sense. But when it comes down to it, there's so many experts in this sector with great platforms and services and products that, you know, building your own CDN doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense unless you're doing something highly specialized with it and you need the complete control over the platform. So not surprising, makes a lot of sense. The data certainly does.
All right, and then on to the next one, where we talk about key criteria for choosing edge compute. Again, performance, not surprising. The location of POPs as opposed to the quantity of POPs was actually more important. That I was very happy to see that. And then virtual machine OSs actually was a little higher than I expected on this. Just briefly, again, Arash, is there a StackPath take on this one?
Yeah, there's two parts to that, at least from our view, right? There's, in the edge computing world, especially with the approach we're taking as being an edge compute platform and then having, you know, applications like CDN run on top of it. For us, it's around two parts. We think in the short term, the market is going to have a conversation, just like it has had with cloud for many years, which is lifting and shifting workloads. And that's really going to be the first major migration. Hey, I'm going to gain an advantage by moving my app to the edge. So lifting and shifting means I need OS support, I need networking support. You know, I want to really be able to pick it up and run with it, right? And if my app isn't containerized, then I'm going to need OS support to match what I'm running. And I think that's why we see this in here, as it becomes, you know, becomes important, is as you think about that lift and shift migration, it's a key component. Longer term, we believe it's all going to shift, just like cloud did, to building edge native applications. And with that, it's going to be a discussion. And this is still, it's already early in edge compute days. So now we're talking even further out in time. You know, it's going to be a discussion on what developer tooling is out there. How am I managing complex distributed databases? And we'll see a shift, and hopefully many, let's call it many additional bars added to this criteria as everyone evolves in the sector.
Well, and as a matter of fact, that again is a nice segue into the fact that the second highest CDN functionality, Eric, great, thank you. The second highest CDN functionality was database as a service, and the first, of course, being virtual machines. So that makes perfect sense, Arash, is what you're describing for the early stage of these conversations about how to handle distributed databases, how to handle distributed applications sitting out on the edge. Containerization is also fairly high, and then of course object storage. Let's go on to the next slide here, because we talked about security as being one of the issues. It rose to the third highest sort of criteria for choosing a CDN. Content protection, far and away, as we've talked about, but application protection and data and analytics. Talk a little bit about that from a StackPath perspective, Arash.
Yeah, of course. So, we view this segment as really around, protecting your content is key, and no surprise that that's the top of the chart here. When we look one layer down into application and data analytics, it really is, from our view, around, how do you provide application and API protection at the edge, right? We believe there is a demand and a need, especially based on how the market, like us, all of us sitting at home, consuming content, has driven this viewpoint of okay, well, I've got to move certain things to the edge. I've got to think about them differently than I have before. So application protection, layer 7, obviously critical. Data and analytics, you want insight as to what's going on, both security-wise and delivery-wise within your platform, and being able to pull that same data back in, analyze it, run it through a SIM if you've got a SOC, and those types of things are just such critical components. And you want to see trends, you want to understand that. And so, the right products in this segment, especially from our viewpoint, are security products that can deliver both the content protection, application protection, bot protection, and you can log in and very easily see, hey, what happened? What are the trends? What's going on with my network? Who's trying to steal my stuff, to oversimplify it and half make a joke. But they're really important. And API and DDoS, again, critical in that process. Obviously, CDN networks are generally resilient to DDoS attacks, but API protection is a fast growing segment. And if you look at the security market space, there's talk of SASE, the Secure Access Service Edge concept, and RASP around runtime access. How do I protect my app during its runtime? And those types of scenarios are all really, really interesting. It just means application protection in general is going to bubble up super high on the list as more companies integrate security into their application stack and then deploy in that same method. So I expect this chart to be very heavily weighted towards application security, especially over the next 24 months.
And speaking of SASE and RASP, we asked a question around that. Why would you not use it? And again, very similar to edge compute, lack of expertise, lack of knowledge, lack of financing, obviously the technical hurdles, lack of redundancy. I'm not quite sure why that's down low on the chart, but it is. So is this one of those education areas as well, Arash? I mean, you rattle off those terms, and there may be people on the call who are like, SASE is self-addressed stamped envelope. That was what I remember that as. But seriously, is this an educational need in the industry?
I think so. And those terms, I always joke about, it's not a new joke. It's the alphabet soup of acronyms, and you give analysts time to go create new terminology. By God, they will create more terminology than any of us could possibly remember for a conversation. And SASE and RASP fall into it. The concept with SASE being really simple. It's this concept of, hey, how do I do, in security, there's always been a conversation around zero trust, right? Lock out everyone who doesn't need to be there and only those that have to be there. And how do I actually enable that? And zero trust has been a great concept, but it is really difficult to execute and then to maintain. I mean, that is a huge burden on security teams and engineering teams in general. And runtime application protection, right? The security that goes into your true app stack. Again, lack of expertise, knowledge, financing, like these are relatively new terms, especially, and even concepts to a degree. And then you look at it and you say, who are the teams that have to do this? Security teams have been always one of the most critical inside of a company, but also one of the least funded, right? So even if they wanted to do a ton of cool stuff and ton of important stuff, they didn't always have access to the capital to do it. And then you go into DevOps teams, and not every company's gone full-blown DevOps automation, CI/CD end-to-end kind of pipeline. Everyone's trying, right? And you've got some that are closer to that kind of vision for it, and a lot of companies and teams that just aren't there yet. And I think you'll see that reflected. So it goes back to absolutely, it's maturation, it's companies evolving the way that they do work and deliver inside. And it is the education of, hey, how do I use these tools? What do I do with them? Why are they important to me? And that will take time, like every kind of new market that spins up.
And we've got 2 more slides here where we ask people open-ended questions, and these are some of the responses that we pulled from it. But to your point about DevOps, one of the things from the tech and support standpoint here that we saw was figuring out a way to balance customer requirements with the stability of the platform against development and QA workflows. That's huge. Cross-platform support and supporting a range of client environments. During last week's Streaming Media Connect, we had a number of conversations around the surface areas that a hacker can hit. So that was big. And then obviously the expertise, number one issue, finding developers who can develop well in general and specifically for video. I think the final slide we have here, Eric, is what changed during COVID. I'm just going to leave this for the audience since we do need to do a wrap up, but more users consuming VOD, more content being streamed, having to move content delivery, vision mixing, communication, etc., into the cloud to be able to do your workflow was actually really huge. And then finally, there were other comments that people made on security, etc. So Arash, back to a 50,000 foot view, since we do have to wrap up and make sure that Dom doesn't ring the bell for us. What's your overall take on what we saw here today? And how does StackPath view this as part of the strategy going forward?
Absolutely, great question. So, it's early days in edge computing, but it is the critical it's the critical timeline or critical concept of how do I improve the experience for my end users, still deliver securely, still deliver effectively. And we see that reflected in the trends. I mean, just the massive growth in video usage, video delivery in general in this segment is huge. And so one of those components is CDN and CDN delivery and application layer. But just as important is, what am I going to do with my app stack? How am I going to deliver that? Where should that live? And really thinking differently about how you solve these problems in order to keep up with this demand and drive. So high level, that's how we view it. And it is a really exciting time to kind of watch, I would say, delivery in general and edge computing evolve. And we're pretty excited to be a part of it in the marketplace.
Nice. Eric, Dom, anything else to add from the standpoint of what we've seen today?
I just want to add briefly that Tim will be writing up an article summarizing all the results you've seen in the discussion today, and that will be going up on streamingmedia.com relatively soon. And I believe we're also going to be able to make the slides available for sharing with folks who are watching today as well. So great summary of the shifts in the market, and I think a great place to lay the foundation for the day, don't you, Dom?
Perfect. Well, yeah, I have to thank so many people there. I'd normally have questions, but we're just so short on time today. So just to say thank you to Arash for an amazing session, and to Tim for pulling all the research together, and to all the people who contributed to the surveys and gave us the data, because without that, that would have obviously been quite difficult to produce. So thank you to everyone for taking part, and thank you, of course, to StackPath for being our platinum sponsor today. That's much appreciated. So I would give a virtual round of applause, but it'll sound tacky off my cheesy little samples desk. So you'll have one from me anyway.